I always imagined the morning of my daughter's wedding would feel like something out of a movie, sunlight pouring in through the curtains, a fresh shirt pressed, and waiting, maybe even a moment of silence to take it all in before the whirlwind of ceremony and celebration swept me up. But instead, I stood alone in the hallway of my quiet home, gripping a small velvet box with a silver key inside. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have, not because of the metal, but because of what it represented. Years of saving. Nights I didn't sleep so I could pick up an extra shift. Vacations I turned down because tuition, rent, and car repairs had to come first. That key was more than access to a house. It was the culmination of nearly 3 decades of fatherhood. I had bought Alina her first home. No mortgage, no strings, no surprises. Just love, concrete and complete. I kept telling myself she'd cry when I gave it to her. Maybe she'd throw her arms around me and whisper something soft like, "I can't believe you did this for me." I imagined her new husband, James, giving me a firm handshake and promising he'd take care of her. Maybe her mother, even in her usual cold tone, would nod in some form of respect. Instead, I felt a pit in my stomach that morning, a gnawing sense that this wasn't going to go the way I wanted. That maybe, just maybe, I had mistaken obligation for gratitude. Still, I dressed up in my charcoal gray suit, tied the same navy tie I wore to her high school graduation, and slipped the box into my jacket pocket. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Alina looked stunning in her lace gown, all tulle and satin, her hair pinned back in a way that reminded me of when she was 5 and used to beg me to do her ponytails, high and tight, like a ballerina. I held it together through the vows, even smiled when James got choked up reading his. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Not until the moment I handed her the box at the reception. She opened it slowly, brows furrowing in confusion. "What's this?" she asked, tilting the key in the light. "It's yours," I said. "The house on Willow Court. The deed's in your name. You don't owe a penny on it." For a second, just a second, I saw her eyes go wide. But instead of tears, a small laugh escaped her lips. Not a joyous one. More like a surprised exhale. "Dad," she said, it's nice. But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," I told her. "You deserve something solid. A start." She smiled and walked away to greet more guests, holding the box loosely in her hand like it was a favor bag she'd eventually forget in someone's car. I stood there for a moment, still holding my glass, watching her disappear into a sea of chiffon and camera flashes. That pit in my stomach returned, deeper now. Later that evening, during the thank you speech, I listened closely as Alina took the microphone with her usual charm and ease. She was always good at that, knowing what to say, when to say it, making people feel warm. She thanked her bridesmaids, her in-laws, James's fraternity brothers, and even the caterers by name. Then she said, "I'm grateful to all of you for your presence. It means so much to me than anything." And that was it. No mention of the house. No nod in my direction. Not even a generic, "Thanks to my amazing father who's always been there." I felt my face heat up, not with embarrassment, but something worse, hurt. Raw, sharp hurt that settled in my chest like cement. I waited until the speeches ended, then quietly pulled her aside near the catering tent, just out of earshot. "I noticed you didn't say anything about the house," I said. I kept my tone light, neutral. I wasn't trying to guilt her. I just genuinely couldn't understand. She tilted her head. "Dad, come on. That's your job. You're my father. Giving me a house isn't some grand gesture. It's the bare minimum." I stared at her, words caught in my throat. I wanted to ask if she was joking, if this was some twisted attempt at humor. But her face was dead serious, calm even, like she was explaining simple math to someone who should already understand. "Alina," I said, my voice lower now, "I worked my entire life to be able to give you that. It's not about money, it's about meaning." She shrugged. "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." In that moment, I felt something break. Not shatter all at once, but crack slowly like a frozen windshield in the sun. I looked at her. Not the little girl who used to run down the hallway in footy pajamas, not the teenager I taught to drive, not even the woman in the white dress, but someone I didn't recognize. Someone who saw my love as currency and my sacrifice as her right. I left the wedding early, made my excuses to a few guests, then went home and sat in the kitchen until nearly 2 a.m. I stared at the printed confirmation for the honeymoon flights to the Maldives. A 5-star resort, private villa, all expenses covered. It was supposed to be my final gift, the send-off to start her married life. But now it felt like pouring champagne into a broken glass. So I canceled every reservation. The next morning, I dropped off a simple envelope at their hotel with a note inside. It wasn't poetic or long, just 20 words. You can't be ungrateful and have an entitled mindset. Love doesn't come with a price tag, but respect does. By noon, my phone was exploding with texts. The first was from Alina. You're being selfish. Petty. The next few came from unknown numbers. One was her new mother-in-law, warning me not to create a scene. Another was my ex-wife, asking what the hell I thought I was doing. But for once in my life, I felt no obligation to explain myself. For once, I chose myself. I didn't answer her texts that day. I didn't return her calls the next. For the first time in my life, I created a wall between me and my daughter that she couldn't climb. Not because I didn't love her, but because I did. And love, real love, demands boundaries. People like to say a parent's love should be unconditional. I used to believe that too. But the older I got, the more I realized that while love may not come with conditions, access does. And respect? That's not automatic. It's earned and maintained. The morning after the wedding, I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold, scrolling through a string of messages that only grew uglier with each passing hour. I can't believe you do this on my wedding weekend. You're trying to humiliate me. You're punishing me because I didn't bow down and cry over a house. The words blurred together, but one stuck out more than the others. Selfish. She kept calling me that, over and over. Like if she said it enough times, it would become true. I didn't feel selfish. I felt betrayed. For years, I had bent myself backward for her, canceled trips, sold investments early, even downsized my own life to keep her safe and supported. I never told her how hard it was to keep things afloat after the divorce, how many nights I went without sleep trying to figure out tuition, rent, groceries, and her dance classes all at once. I shielded her from every worry. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I had loved her too much, too gently, too consistently, and in doing so, I taught her that my sacrifices were just standard, expected. She never saw the cost because I never let her. She never understood the weight because I carried it silently. That night, my brother Mark called. I hadn't spoken to him much over the years. He moved to Colorado, lived a quieter life, no kids, no complications, but he must have heard through the grapevine. You all right? He asked, his voice rough with sleep or worry. I couldn't tell which. I don't know, I said honestly. I feel like I just cut my heart out of my own chest. You didn't cut it out, he said. You just stopped letting someone stomp on it. That line stuck with me for days. By Monday, the family group chat was flooded. My sister, who hadn't even attended the wedding, chimed in with her unsolicited opinion. You overreacted. This generation doesn't do speeches like we used to. She probably forgot in the moment. My cousin Peter, always the instigator, posted a passive-aggressive meme about parents holding gifts over their kids' heads. And then came the voice memo from Alina. I should have deleted it. I should have spared myself. But curiosity got the better of me. Her voice came through my phone like a knife dressed in silk. Hi, Dad. She began, her tone syrupy at first, then sour. So, I guess this is who you are now. The kind of dad who cancels a honeymoon because his daughter didn't fawn over him in a speech. You really embarrassed me, you know that? James's whole family thinks you're some bitter, attention-starved drama queen. And maybe you are. I mean, you think money fixes everything, but it doesn't. You bought me a house so you could say, look at me, I'm the best dad. You weren't being generous, you were performing. And the second you didn't get applause, you punished me. You're selfish, Dad. And I'm tired of pretending you're not. She ended with silence. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. I didn't cry. I expected I would. But instead, I felt something harder, something steel-like solidify inside me. Maybe that's what finally breaking looks like. Not tears, not anger, just resolve. A cold, Calm refusal to be guilt by the very person who took the most. The next day, I got a call from one of my coworkers, Nina. She was more of a friend than anything, someone I often shared lunch breaks with and talked about real life instead of small talk. Heard about the wedding, she said gently. Of course you did, I sighed. I think it made the rounds before the bouquet hit the ground. She didn't laugh. She just waited. I told her everything. From the house gift to the speech to the voicemail. When I was done, she asked, if she'd just said thank you, would it have changed anything? I paused. Honestly, maybe not. Maybe I would have still felt used. But at least I would have felt seen. That's not selfish, she said. That's human. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Then she added something I didn't expect. You gave her a house, and she gave you a reminder. That love without appreciation turns into obligation. And obligation is where resentment grows. The truth of that hit me deep. That week, I boxed up the few remaining wedding decorations Alina had stored at my place. Menus, ribbons, an extra pair of white heels she never wore, and shipped them to her new address. No note. No message. Just her things. Her life. Her choices. I also went into my financial account and removed her as a beneficiary on a few things. It felt cruel, but necessary. If I didn't start protecting myself now, I never would. I told no one. I didn't post cryptic quotes online. I didn't make a scene. I just let go. Quietly. Deliberately. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I don't remember sleeping that week. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me like some slow, lazy clock that didn't care about time or heartbreak. The days blurred together. Sunlight came and went, but my chest remained heavy, like something invisible had lodged itself between my ribs and refused to move. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. How did we get here? It was like watching a house burn and realizing, too late, that the match had been lit years ago. Maybe it was my fault for always making life too easy for her. Maybe the problem wasn't the wedding speech, or even the voicemail. It was the slow erosion of respect that I had allowed by mistaking closeness for entitlement. On Wednesday, I received an email from the travel agency confirming the full cancellation of the honeymoon package. No refund for the deposit, but the rest was voided. I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel regret. It was the first decision I made in a long time that felt like it belonged entirely to me. Not a performance, not a favor, just a line in the sand. And that line, it had to be drawn. I printed the cancellation notice and folded it into an envelope with a short note. Love isn't a transaction, but gratitude is an expectation. If my love is only valuable when it's convenient, then I've failed you as a parent. This is me correcting that mistake. I drove to the house I bought for her. Yes, that house, and slid the envelope under the front door. The driveway was empty. James must have taken her out, or maybe they were avoiding me. Either way, I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to explain. I was there to be done. But of course, nothing ends cleanly in a family. By that evening, the phone calls had restarted. Her voice, sharper now, more frantic, filled my voicemail box again. I can't believe you did this. You're ruining everything. James is humiliated. His parents think I'm married into a family of control freaks. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? You can't stand when I'm happy without you. Well, guess what? I am happy. You don't get to take that away. She wasn't crying. I listened twice, just to be sure. No tears. Just anger. She was furious not because I had hurt her, but because I hadn't obeyed. That's what stung the most. And yet, some part of me still wanted to be wrong. Still wanted her to call back and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I would have forgiven her. I know I would have. But forgiveness without accountability is just enabling, and I'd enabled her long enough. That Friday, I got a call from her mother, Lisa. We hadn't spoken directly in years. Not since the divorce finally stopped smoldering and turned into a polite Cold War of silent handoffs and brief texts. She never liked to pick sides, but this time she did. You had no right, she snapped. No hello. No preamble. Do you know how humiliated she is? She's in tears every night, John. I held the phone to my ear and looked out the window, watching the neighbor's sprinklers dance across the lawn. Good, I said. Maybe she'll learn something from it. Lisa let out a breath like I had slapped her. She's your daughter. You don't just walk away because she hurt your feelings. It wasn't my feelings, I said quietly. It was my dignity. There was a pause. I could feel her preparing her next blow. You're punishing her to feed your ego. That hit me harder than it should have. For a second, I wondered if she was right. Was this just a tantrum in disguise? Had I let one bad moment destroy decades of relationship? Then I remembered the look in Alina's eyes when she told me the house was the bare minimum. Not a flicker of remorse. Not a moment of hesitation. Just expectation, cold and unapologetic. And in that memory, I found my answer. She can think whatever she wants, I said. But she's not entitled to the parts of me she refuses to respect. Lisa hung up. The silence that followed was almost soothing. The following weekend, I ran into someone I didn't expect. Ramon, the son of our old neighbors, now grown and married himself. He was shopping for tile in the hardware store, and we started catching up. He'd always been the quiet type, respectful. As we talked, I realized I was still holding back my story, still editing myself out of fear of sounding petty. Then he asked, "You didn't go on the honeymoon trip?" I blinked. "You heard about that?" He smiled awkwardly. Alina posted something online. Something about being gaslit by narcissists and cutting out toxic family. There it was. Public fallout. Family gossip in digital form. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. I guess that makes me the villain now. Ramon tilted his head. Or maybe the first one to stop playing pretend. That line stayed with me longer than it should have. I left the store, drove past the house on Willow Court one last time, and noticed the porch light was on. They'd moved in. My gift, still standing, even as I was pushed out of the picture. That was the irony of it all. She could rage and smear my name, but she still lived under the roof I gave her. And still, I hoped she'd be okay. That night, I sat down and started writing. Not to her, not to anyone else, just to myself. A journal entry, something raw and unfiltered. I wrote about love, about how we teach people how to treat us, often without realizing it. About how the moment we accept disrespect as normal is the moment we lose ourselves. I wrote until my hand cramped, and for the first time since the wedding, I slept all the way through the night. Not peacefully, but fully. The first Sunday after everything unraveled, I found myself in church. Not out of devotion. I hadn't been a regular in years, but out of habit, like a man returning to the last place he remembered feeling whole. I sat in the back row, deliberately late, hoping to sneak in unseen. The music had already started, and the room was full of raised hands, tilted heads, people swaying in surrender. But I didn't move. I just stared at the stained glass window above the pulpit, watching the morning light bleed through it like some slow, divine judgment. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I just wanted silence. Space. A place where my daughter's voice couldn't reach me. But even there, I wasn't safe. After service, a woman I barely knew tapped me on the shoulder. Mrs. Dalton. She used to carpool with my ex-wife years ago. Wore those clunky prescription glasses and a permanent smile, like she was always about to offer you a casserole or unsolicited advice. "I heard about Alina," she said softly, resting a hand on my arm like she was comforting a grieving widower. "Kids say things they don't mean. You can't hold on to it too tightly." I nodded politely, but said nothing. What was I supposed to do? Stand up in the middle of fellowship and say, "Actually, my daughter dismissed a house I gave her as bare minimum, and now calls me toxic online"? No one wants to hear that. Not at church. Not anywhere. But it didn't stop there. The fallout followed me everywhere. On Tuesday, I walked into the auto shop I'd been going to for 15 years, and Steve, the mechanic who once helped me fix Alina's first car on a weekend for free, joked, "Man, your daughter lit you up online. Rough wedding, huh?" I smiled thinly. "Something like that." He shrugged. "You'll make up. You always do." "That's the problem," I wanted to say. We always did. And every time we did, I gave up a little more of myself. The most unexpected call came that Thursday. A name popped up I hadn't seen in years, Rebecca Samuels. She used to rent the basement apartment from me back when Alina was still in college. Single mom, working nights, raising a boy with asthma and never once missing the rent by a day. "Hi, John," she said, almost nervous. I know it's been a while, and I don't want to intrude, but I saw the post. The one your daughter made. I sighed. Of course you did. I don't want to gossip, she added quickly. But I wanted to tell you something. I stayed silent. You were always good to me, she said. When the heater broke, you came over with a wrench in one hand and soup in the other. When my son needed a ride to urgent care, you drove. You didn't have to. You just did. I cleared my throat. Rebecca, no, she said firmly. Let me say this. You gave more than anyone I've ever rented from. And I remember Alina back then. How she came home. How you packed her lunches for med school even when she said she didn't need them. Maybe she forgot. But I didn't. Her words landed harder than I expected. She wasn't family. She wasn't obligated to soften the truth or twist the narrative. She had just seen me and remembered. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I needed that. I figured, she replied. Sometimes, the people closest to us can't see us clearly. They're too busy looking in mirrors. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of scotch and every card Alina had ever made me as a child. I don't know why I kept them. Some part of me always assumed I'd need the reminders. Crayon drawings with best dad ever in crooked letters. Mother's Day cards where she scribbled, since we don't have a mom here today, I'll celebrate you too. I read them all, slowly, one by one, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I missed the child version of her more than I liked the adult she had become. That's a brutal thing to confess, even to myself. But it was true. The little girl who once kissed my cheek before bed and whispered, "You're my whole world," no longer existed. She had grown into someone else. Someone who measured love in gifts and respect in obedience. And maybe I had a hand in that. Maybe I helped build the pedestal she now looked down from. But I also knew this. I wasn't going to climb up there just to beg for forgiveness I didn't know. By Friday, the silence between us had turned into something thicker. Not absence, but distance. Active, deliberate distance. I hadn't blocked her, hadn't responded, but I also hadn't relented. And to her, that was louder than any insult. That's when James finally reached out. He sent a short message, one I read twice just to be sure I understood. I know this is between you and Alina, but I hope one day we can talk. I never wanted to be in the middle. I respected him for that, more than I expected, but I didn't reply, because this wasn't about James. It wasn't even about the house anymore. It was about truth. And the truth was, I wasn't going to be manipulated into guilt just because my love had limits. I wasn't going to apologize for finally saying, "This is enough. I am enough. And I deserve more than silence and scorn in return." The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, just after I'd returned from a walk around the neighborhood. My phone buzzed as I set my keys on the counter, and there it was, her name, staring back at me like a challenge. Alina Russell. No subject line, just a time stamp and a digital envelope that pulsed with history. I stared at it for a long while, debating whether to open it right away or wait until I felt stronger. But waiting wouldn't change what it said. Pain doesn't dilute with time. It just sits there, growing teeth. I tapped the screen, and the message opened. There were no greetings. No "Dear Dad" or "Hi." She just launched in, like she had rehearsed this monologue in her head 100 times and wasn't willing to waste a single breath on courtesy. I'm writing this because I don't know how else to make you understand. Maybe you won't, and maybe that's the problem. You've always been so good at playing the hero, doing these big gestures, writing checks, buying gifts, and then waiting for the applause. You say they're out of love, but they always come with strings. You gave me a house, yes, and that's huge. I'm not stupid. I know how much that costs. But what you never seem to see is the cost of being your daughter. The constant expectation to perform, to appreciate you perfectly, to never mess up. Do you know how exhausting it is to always feel indebted? I paused, the words blurring together as the lump in my throat grew. The cost of being your daughter. That line cut. Because she was right in one way. Love shouldn't feel like a debt. But she was wrong about what I wanted in return. I never asked for applause. Just acknowledgement. A nod. A moment where she saw me as something other than a wallet wrapped in emotional expectations. I kept reading. You think I'm ungrateful because I didn't say thank you in front of everyone. But maybe I was just overwhelmed. Maybe I didn't want to turn my wedding into a charity spotlight. You say I treated the house like the bare minimum, but in my head, it felt like, of course you do that. Because you always do. You always go overboard, then act wounded when people don't react the way you want. It's manipulative. It's unfair. And honestly, it's been building for years. I used to tell people you were the best dad, because you were always there. But being there doesn't mean being right. And now, instead of talking to me, you cancel things. You leave notes like ultimatums. You weaponize silence. So if this is your new version of love, conditional, quiet, dramatic, then maybe I don't want it. I stopped reading for a moment and let the screen dim. The house was dead quiet. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the occasional creak of the foundation, the world moving on around me while I sat still in my kitchen, absorbing blame like I was made of sponge. Maybe she didn't mean for it to be cruel. Maybe she thought she was being honest. But there was something chilling about how casually she reduced my pain to a performance, my silence to punishment. The last paragraph was shorter. I'm not asking for us to go back to how things were. I'm asking you to consider that maybe this isn't just about a house or a honeymoon. Maybe it's about the way you love, with expectations instead of presence. And if you can't change that, then maybe we shouldn't be in each other's lives right now. There it was, a line drawn in soft ink. She didn't say goodbye, but she might as well have. I didn't reply. I sat with the message for days, letting it marinate in my chest until it started to lose its sting. Not because it stopped hurting, but because clarity eventually replaces shock. What she called expectation, I had called mutual respect. What she saw as manipulation, I saw as boundaries drawn after a lifetime of being taken for granted. But I didn't write her a counterargument. I didn't send a rebuttal, point by point, trying to win a fight no one asked me to join. Instead, I went to my garage, pulled out the old journals I used to keep when she was little, and read them, just to remember who I used to be before I felt like a stranger in my own family. There were entries from her first recital, her first ER visit, the night she cried when her pet turtle died, and I stayed up sewing a tiny burial cloth out of her old pajamas. Back then, love felt simple, raw and immediate, not conditional, not political, just love. But somewhere along the way, it got complicated. Or maybe she got complicated. Or maybe I just became inconvenient. Later that week, my neighbor Deshaun dropped by. He's younger, mid-30s, married with 2 boys who loved to use my driveway as a basketball court. He'd heard some of the noise, enough to know something had gone down. "You all right, Mr. R?" he asked, standing on the porch with a 6-pack of root beer, and that look younger men give older men when they want to help but don't want to overstep. "Define all right," I said, stepping aside to let him in. We sat on the porch and sipped quietly for a few minutes before I finally said it out loud. "My daughter thinks I'm a narcissist." Deshaun blinked. "Damn," I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt ridiculous to hear it spoken back to me. "You think she's right?" I asked. He thought about it. "No. I think you're a man who gave everything and didn't know how to ask for anything. And now that you finally did, it pissed someone off." I stared at him. "That's simple." "Yeah," he said. "Most family stuff is. Complicated feelings. Simple roots." That night, I printed her email and folded it carefully. I didn't burn it. I didn't shred it. I put it in a box, one filled with her old cards, her childhood drawings, and the deed to the house she now lived in. Not because I wanted to preserve the pain, but because someday, if she ever comes back, I want her to see it all. The full story. The messy, unedited, complicated love of a father who finally chose not to beg for his place in his child's life. It had been 6 months since the wedding. 6 months since I last heard her voice, other than in that email that still sat folded inside a box in my closet. A box I hadn't touched since the day I filed it away, not out of bitterness, but self-preservation. I stopped checking her social media after the first couple weeks, when the passive-aggressive quotes turned into targeted jabs and mutual friends began quietly unfollowing me. I deleted the family group chat and archived the texts. The world hadn't stopped spinning, but mine had tilted just enough to feel unfamiliar. And yet, in the stillness that followed, I found something I hadn't expected: peace. It didn't come in waves. It didn't arrive with fanfare or healing quotes or therapy sessions. It came in moments, silent, unspectacular moments, like walking past the house I almost bought for myself years ago and realizing I didn't need it anymore. Or watching the sun rise from the back porch without wondering if she was okay, if she was mad, if she'd ever call. Peace came when I stopped trying to fix what someone else was committed to misunderstanding. I had just come in from mowing the lawn when the letter arrived. A thick envelope, handwritten, with no return address. But the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. Alina. I held it for a long time before opening it. Not because I was scared of what it said, but because I needed to decide who I wanted to be before I read it. The man waiting for an apology, or the man who had already moved on from needing one. I opened it at the kitchen table, next to the coffee pot and the sunflowers I'd started buying every other Saturday from the farmer's market. The first page was folded tightly, as if she'd rewritten it several times before finally deciding on this version. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks ago. That was the first line. My chest tightened, not from pain, but memory. The image of her as a child, hiding under my desk after breaking a lamp, eyes wide and unsure. Now she was going to be a mother. I wasn't going to tell you. Honestly, I didn't think I wanted you involved. But then I saw something the other day. A man, older like you, bending down to tie his granddaughter's shoe in the park. And I don't know why, but I started crying. Because I remembered how you used to kneel and tie mine. Double knots. Always double knots. She went on for 3 pages. No direct apology. No admission of wrongdoing. But laced between her sentences were cracks. Regret shaped as anecdotes. Soft confessions that didn't excuse her actions, but acknowledged them in a way that wasn't possible before. I said cruel things. Not because they were true, but because I didn't want to feel small. You made me feel small when you pulled away. I know now that it wasn't punishment. It was protection. I just didn't understand that then. She ended with a line that took me a while to absorb. I'm not asking you to come back into my life. I'm just leaving the door open if you want to knock. I set the letter down, folded my hands, and stared at the table for a long time. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. A tiredness that came from loving someone so deeply that you had to let them go just to survive. But I also felt clarity. I wasn't going to step back into the same dynamic just because there was a baby on the way. I wasn't going to be summoned by guilt disguised as olive branches. But I wasn't going to harden myself so much that I lost my humanity, either. So I mailed her one thing. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a gift card or a baby outfit. It was a children's book she used to love. The Velveteen Rabbit. I had kept the old, tattered copy from her childhood, but I bought a new one. Inside, I wrote on the first page, "Love becomes real when it's lived, not expected." I hope you'll teach them that. It took me too long to learn. No signature. Just that. It was the softest gesture I could make without surrendering myself again. Weeks passed. No response. No second letter. And that was okay. I didn't send it for a reply. I sent it to show that even boundaries can carry compassion. That even distance can still hold a flicker of warmth, if only from memory. The truth is, I didn't need to be part of her life if it meant returning to the version of me who accepted scraps and called it love. I didn't need to be Dad the provider, or Dad the wallet, or Dad who forgives no matter what. I needed to be a man who remembered his worth. A man who chose peace over proximity. And that's who I became. I started traveling again. Nothing fancy. Road trips to small towns. Visits to old friends I hadn't seen since before Alina was born. I laughed more. I cooked meals for myself instead of just heating frozen ones. I read novels I used to say I didn't have time for. I built a life that wasn't centered around waiting to be wanted. Do I miss her? Of course I do. Every day. But I miss her like you miss someone who used to be kind. Someone who used to love you without conditions. Someone who used to say thank you and mean it. That version of her is gone. And I've accepted that. What remains is this. A man who gave everything, lost something, and still found a way to live with grace. Love with boundaries isn't cold, it's courageous. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting someone go. It's choosing not to chase them when they do. If you've ever had to love from a distance, share your story below. This space is for healing. And for those who refuse to confuse loyalty with self-neglect. See you soon in the next story.